The desert wind howled like a ghost through the cracked asphalt of Route 66, carrying the faint scent of sagebrush and regret. It was just past midnight when the old pickup truck veered off the shoulder, its headlights slicing through the darkness like desperate pleas. Inside, a boy no older than 10 clutched the dashboard, his small face pale under the glow of the dashboard lights. His mother, Sophia, gripped the wheel with white-knuckled hands, her eyes wide with exhaustion and fear. They'd been driving for hours, fleeing a life that had turned sour in the neon-lit sprawl of Las Vegas. Debts, whispers of danger, a husband who'd vanished years ago, leaving only echoes and a faded tattoo on her wrist as proof of better days. The truck hit a pothole, tires screeching, and suddenly the world tilted. Metal groaned, glass shattered, and the vehicle flipped into the ditch, rolling once, twice, before coming to a shuddering stop amid the tumbleweeds. The boy, Lucas, crawled out first, coughing dust from his lungs, his knee scraped raw against the jagged earth. "Mom," he whispered, his voice breaking like dry twigs. But Sophia didn't stir from the wreckage. Her body slumped against the crumpled door, a thin trickle of blood tracing her temple. Panic clawed at Lucas's chest. He was alone in the vast emptiness, the stars above indifferent witnesses to his terror. He stumbled back onto the road, waving his arms at the empty highway, tears carving clean paths through the grime on his cheeks. Headlights approached from the horizon, a lone motorcycle. Its engine a low, thunderous rumble that vibrated through the ground. The rider slowed, the bike's headlight bathing the scene in harsh white light, revealing the twisted metal and the small figure trembling in the dust. Ethan Hawk Riley killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the boy's sobs. At 45, Hawk was a man forged in the fires of forgotten wars and broken oaths. His leather vest scarred from rides across forgotten frontiers. His face, weathered by sun and sorrow, bore the lines of a life spent chasing shadows. A decorated veteran who'd traded his uniform for the open road after losing everything in a roadside ambush overseas. He'd buried his wife, or so he'd thought, 5 years ago in a fiery crash that left no body, only ashes and a promise whispered at her grave, to live with honor, to protect the innocent as she'd always urged. Now, as he dismounted, boots crunching on gravel, he saw the boy and the wreck, and something primal stirred in his chest. "Hey, kid," Hawk said, his voice gravel rough but steady, kneeling to the boy's level. "You're safe now. What's your name?" Lucas wiped his eyes, staring up at the stranger with wide, distrustful eyes. "Lucas, my mom's hurt. Please, help her." Hawk nodded. No questions, no hesitation. He pulled a flashlight from his saddlebag, its beam cutting through the night to assess the damage. Sophia groaned faintly as he eased her from the cab, her pulse weak but present under his calloused fingers. With practiced calm, skills from battlefield triage, he stabilized her neck, wrapping his bandana around the gash on her head. The boy hovered close, clutching Hawk's arm like a lifeline. Sirens wailed in the distance, but out here, help was hours away. Hawk radioed his crew on the encrypted line of the Iron Vow MC, a brotherhood of riders bound by codes older than the highways they patrolled. "Got a rollover on 66, mile marker 147, woman and kid, need evac now." Within minutes, the horizon lit up with approaching bikes, a convoy of 20 shadows materializing from the dark, engines purring like guardians awakened. As the first aid kit was unpacked and blankets draped over the survivors, Hawk sat back on his haunches, watching Lucas. The boy's gaze drifted to Hawk's forearm, where ink peeked from under his sleeve, a delicate script reading "Sophia Forever," entwined with a hawk's wing, faded but unmistakable. Lucas's breath hitched. "Mister, why's my mom's name tattooed on you?" The words hung in the chill air, simple and shattering. Hawk froze, his world narrowing to that single revelation. He rolled up his sleeve fully, the tattoo stark against his skin, A vow etched in his youth, when love was fierce and promises unbreakable. Sophia, his Sophia, stirred under the medic's care, her eyelids fluttering. No, it couldn't be. The crash reports, the empty casket, the endless nights he'd ridden to outrun the grief, all crumbling like sand castles before the tide. Hawk's knees buckled, and he sank to the earth, the desert floor cool against his palms. Emotions warred in his chest, joy laced with betrayal, relief tangled with rage at whatever fate had stolen her from him. "Son," he murmured, voice thick, "that's a story older than these stars." Lucas scooted closer, confusion giving way to a spark of hope, as if this stranger's pain mirrored his own fractured world. The convoy's lights formed a protective circle, engines idling like watchful sentinels, while paramedics loaded Sophia onto a stretcher. Hawk rose unsteadily, helping lift her, his hand brushing hers. A touch that ignited memories of stolen kisses under motel neon, of oaths sworn in the dead of night. By dawn, as the first rays gilded the horizon, the group rolled out in formation, bikes flanking the ambulance like iron angels. Hawk rode point, wind whipping his face, the boy's question echoing louder than the roar of his Harley. He'd thought her gone, a ghost haunting his rides, but now, a promise long buried clawed its way back to life. The Iron Vow wasn't just a club, it was family forged in fire, and Hawk knew this reunion would demand everything: truths unearthed, loyalties tested, and a justice that burned hotter than desert sun. Little did he know, the road ahead twisted through corruption's underbelly, where old enemies lurked, and the boy's innocent query was the key to unlocking a legacy of redemption. The ambulance sirens faded into the distance, but Hawk's mind raced ahead. Sophia, alive, breathing, with a son who carried his eyes. The tattoo, once a scar of loss, now pulsed like a beacon. He'd failed her once, or so the nightmares whispered, abandoning the search too soon after the official word. But no more. As the convoy crested a rise, the sun breaking free, Hawk gunned his throttle, the vibrations syncing with his heartbeat. For Lucas, for Sophia, he'd ride through hell itself. The desert stretched endless, a canvas for the story unfolding, one of silent oaths and unbreakable bonds, where a single question from a child could realign the stars. Word count, 872. The sun climbed higher over the barren mesas, painting the convoy in strokes of gold and shadow as they thundered toward the nearest outpost of civilization, a dusty town called Dust Haven, where the only hospital stood like a weary sentinel against the horizon. Hawk rode at the forefront, his Harley's engine a steady growl that drowned out the whirlwind in his mind. The wind tugged at his vest, carrying the sharp tang of creosote bushes and the faint metallic bite of exhaust. Behind him, the Iron Vow brothers flanked the ambulance in a V formation, their bikes a rolling wall of chrome and leather, headlights flickering like distant stars. Lucas peered out from the back of a sidecar, rigged to one of the rigs, his small hands gripping the edge, eyes fixed on Hawk's broad back, as if it were the anchor to his unraveling world. Inside the ambulance, Sophia drifted in and out of consciousness, the paramedics' voices a muffled hum over the beeps of monitors. Her hand twitched, fingers curling as fragments of memory surfaced. Nights under starlit skies with a man whose laugh could chase away storms. A ring slipped onto her finger in a roadside chapel. Then the accident that shattered it all. She'd survived that crash years ago, or so the haze told her. But amnesia had stolen chunks of her life, leaving her to rebuild in the shadows of Las Vegas. Fleeing with Lucas had been instinct, a mother's desperate bid to shield her son from the creeping threats of her past life, debts tied to shady figures who'd once promised protection but delivered chains. Now, as the vehicle bumped over cracked pavement, a name echoed in her fevered thoughts. Ethan. Hawk. Could it be? Hawk's radio crackled to life, breaking his reverie. "Boss, we're 5 out. Doc Ramirez is prepping the ER. Kid's holding up, but he's asking questions." It was Jax, Hawk's second in command, a burly veteran with a scar across his jaw from the same war that had forged their bond. Jax had been there when Hawk returned from overseas. A shell of a man after the ambush that claimed his unit, and he'd believed his wife. The Iron Vow had pulled him from the abyss, their creed simple, oaths kept, brothers guarded, innocence shielded. Hawk thumbed the mic. "Keep him close. Tell him we're almost there." He glanced in his mirror, catching Lucas's gaze. The boy's expression was a mix of awe and uncertainty, like a colt testing unfamiliar ground. They rolled into Dust Haven as the morning heat began to shimmer off the asphalt, tires humming over faded yellow lines. The hospital loomed, a squat building of faded brick, its sign creaking in the breeze. Engines cut one by one, the sudden quiet amplifying the distant wail of the ambulance pulling into the bay. Hawk dismounted, boots hitting the ground with a thud that echoed his pounding heart. Medics wheeled Sophia inside, her form pale under the white sheet, while Lucas scrambled out, running to Hawk's side. "Is she gonna be okay?" the boy asked, voice small against the vast sky. Hawk knelt, placing a reassuring hand on Lucas's shoulder, the leather of his glove rough against the child's shirt. "She's tough, kid, like you. Come on, let's get you checked too." As they followed the stretcher, the Iron Vow crew dispersed, some securing the bikes in the lot, others forming a loose perimeter around the entrance. Whispers rippled through the small crowd of early morning locals. Bikers in town meant trouble or salvation, depending on the tales. Inside, the air was cool and antiseptic. Fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like trapped insects. A nurse, with kind eyes, Ella, her badge red, ushered them to a waiting area, the scent of coffee mingling with the sharp sting of iodine. While Lucas got a quick once-over in an exam room, Hawk paced the hallway, his mind replaying the tattoo's revelation like a scratched film reel. Flashback hit him unbidden. Their wedding night. Sophia's laughter as she traced the fresh ink on his arm, her touch igniting promises of forever. "This binds us, Hawk," she'd said, eyes shining in the dim light of their first shared motel room. Then the call 5 years back, crash on a rain-slicked interstate, body unidentified, presumed lost in the inferno. He'd ridden for weeks, scouring leads until exhaustion claimed him, the official report sealing his grief. But now, evidence of life, a son with his stubborn jawline. Betrayal, burned, not at her but at the system that had lied, or hidden, the truth. Jax approached, handing Hawk a steaming cup from the vending machine. "Crew's on alert, words out. Some lowlifes from Vega might have tailed that truck, if they're connected to her past." He let the implication hang, his eyes scanning the windows. Hawk nodded, sipping the bitter brew. The Iron Vow wasn't just riders. They were enforcers of moral code in a world gone crooked, patrolling routes where law faltered. If corruption had played a hand in Sophia's death, they'd unearth it, oaths be damned. Lucas emerged, a bandage on his knee, and tugged at Hawk's sleeve. "They said Mom's stable. Can I see her?" Hawk led him to the room, the door whispering shut behind them. Sophia lay under crisp sheets, IV lines tracing paths like veins of light. Her eyes opened slowly, focusing on the pair. "Lucas, and you." Recognition flickered, weak but real. Hawk's throat tightened. "Sophia, it's me, Ethan." She reached out, her fingers brushing the tattoo, tears welling. "I thought they said you were gone. After the fight, the threats, I ran to protect you both." The boy climbed onto the bed, nestling close. "He's the one with your name on his arm, Mom, like a secret." Sophia smiled faintly, pulling Lucas near. Hawk stood sentinel, the weight of unspoken years pressing down. Outside, Jax's voice cut through the intercom. "Riders!" Eyes sharp, unmarked van circling the block. Tension coiled like a spring. The reunion was fragile, a flame in the wind, and shadows from the past were closing in, old debts demanding payment, truths buried under layers of deceit. Hawk's hand rested on his knife hilt, not for violence, but resolve. For this family he'd thought lost, he'd carve a path through the lies, honoring the vow that had survived the grave. As afternoon light slanted through the blinds, casting long shadows across the room, Hawk felt the pull of the road ahead. Questions swirled. Who had faked her death? What dangers stalked Lucas? The iron vow would ride as one, their loyalty a shield against the storm. But in that quiet moment, with Sophia's hand in his and the boy's trust blooming, Hawk knew redemption wasn't just survival, it was reclaiming the light they'd all lost. And now, I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. Word count 878. The hospital corridors hummed with the low drone of fluorescent lights, their cold glow casting elongated shadows that danced like uneasy spectres across the linoleum floors. Hawk stood by the window in Sophia's room, his silhouette framed against the late afternoon sun, dipping toward the jagged horizon of Dusthaven. The air inside carried the sterile tang of disinfectant, undercut by the faint, earthy scent of the desert seeping through the cracked pane. Lucas sat cross-legged on the edge of the bed, his small fingers tracing the edge of the blanket, eyes darting between his mother and the man who seemed both stranger and savior. Sophia's breathing had steadied, the IV drip a rhythmic counterpoint to the tension, thickening the space between them. She squeezed Hawk's hand, her touch fragile yet insistent, pulling him back from the edge of his thoughts. "Ethan, after the crash, everything blurred. They told me you didn't make it, said the fire took you on that overseas run. I woke up in a clinic, no papers, no past, just Lucas growing inside me and fragments of us." Her voice was a whisper, laced with the weight of years stolen, her eyes searching his face for the man she'd loved under endless skies. Hawk's jaw tightened, the tattoo on his arm itching like a fresh wound under her gaze. He'd ridden those war-torn roads, delivering aid under fire, only to return to a life gutted by lies. The military report had been clean, official. Wife perished in a stateside wreck while he was deployed. But now, the pieces didn't fit. Shadowy figures in Vegas, debts that smelled of organized grip, a fake death to silence threats. "I searched," Hawk said, his voice low and rough, like gravel under tires. "Tore through records, rode every lead until the trail went cold, buried an empty box, and kept riding to honor what we had." He glanced at Lucas, the boy's wide eyes mirroring his own from childhood, stubborn, unyielding. "This kid, he's ours, isn't he?" Sophia nodded, tears tracing silent paths down her cheeks. Lucas shifted, confusion knitting his brow. "You mean, you're my dad? Like, for real?" The question hung, simple and profound, cracking the armor Hawk had worn like a second skin. He knelt beside the bed, leveling his gaze with the boys. "Yeah, son, I am. And I promise you, no one's taking us apart again." Outside, the parking lot baked under the relentless sun, the Iron Vow bikes lined up like silent warriors, chrome glinting in warning. Jax leaned against his chopper, arms crossed, his sharp eyes tracking the unmarked van that had looped the block twice now. It was a nondescript beast. Blacked-out windows and mud-caked tires, the kind that screamed trouble in these forgotten corners. "Boss," Jax murmured into his radio, voice steady but edged with steel, "that ride's not local, plates fake, scratched off like bad ink." Hawk's response crackled back, "Eyes on it, no moves till I say." The Brotherhood's code pulsed through their veins. Protect the vulnerable, uphold the oath against the corrupt. They'd seen too many innocents crushed under the boot of greed, crooked officials turning blind eyes to human trafficking rings masked as protection services, veterans like them discarded after the fight. In the room, the moment shattered as Ella, the nurse, poked her head in, her face tight with concern. Sheriff's on his way. Routine check on the accident report, but there's talk of outsiders asking questions at the desk. Sophia's grip tightened on Hawk's hand, fear flickering in her eyes. They found us. The ones from Vegas, loan sharks with badges in their pockets. I borrowed to start over after. After they said you were gone, they twisted it into chains. Her words painted a grim picture. A web of false identities planted evidence that kept her silent. A death staged to erase loose ends. Lucas huddled closer to her, the boy's innocence a stark contrast to the storm brewing. Hawk rose, his mind shifting to battle mode, the quiet resolve of a man who'd stared down ambushes overseas. You rest. I'll handle this. He stepped into the hall, Jax falling in beside him like a shadow. The crew assembled subtly, 5 riders melting into the lobby, vests zipped to hide their patches, but hands ready near concealed holsters. Not for guns, but for the moral stand. Evidence, witnesses, a code that valued truth over brute force. The van idled across the street now, engine purring low, 2 figures emerging, hard-eyed men in cheap suits, the kind who peddled influence in backroom deals. One lit a cigarette, the flame briefly illuminating a badge clipped too casually to his belt. The sheriff arrived first, a portly man named Harlan with a moustache like tangled wire and eyes that darted too quickly. He cornered Hawk in the waiting area, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Riley, this rollover. Witnesses say you and your posse showed up fast. Care to explain?" Hawk met his gaze evenly, the scent of stale coffee on the man's breath mingling with the hallway's chill. "Found him in the ditch. Called it in, that's all." Harlan's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Lady inside matches a missing persons from Vegas. Debts, they say. Might need to take the boy for questioning." The words ignited a fire in Hawk's chest, corruption's ugly face preying on the broken. Jax tensed beside him, but Hawk raised a hand, voice calm as desert wind. "She's no missing person. She's family. And if those debts are as crooked as the ones chasing her, you'll want our side before you dig deeper." Harlan hesitated, glancing toward the window where the van loomed. Whispers from the crew filtered in. One rider had snapped photos of the suits, another traced the van's plates to a shell company tied to Vegas syndicates. The Iron Vows network ran deep. Old war buddies in law enforcement, hackers who'd traded uniforms for keyboards, all bound by loyalty. As Harlan retreated to make a call, the suits crossed the lot, boots scuffing gravel. Hawk stepped outside, the heat slamming into him like a wall, the sun's glare turning the world to molten gold. "Walk away," he said, positioning himself between them and the doors. The lead man smirked, flicking his cigarette. "Hand over the woman and kid. Debts don't vanish." But Hawk stood firm, the weight of his promise, a tattoo, a son, a life reclaimed, anchoring him. Not today, not ever. Engines revved behind him, the crew forming up, a wall of resolve. No shots fired, no fists thrown, just the unyielding stand of men who knew justice wasn't handed down. It was ridden out, mile by mile. Inside, Sophia watched from the window, Lucas at her side, the boy's hand in hers. "He's fighting for us," she murmured, pride swelling amid the fear. The standoff stretched, tension coiling like a spring under the vast sky. Hawk knew this was just the opening salvo. Deeper lies waited, alliances to forge, a redemption that demanded they all ride as one. The desert whispered promises of trials ahead, but in that heated moment, family wasn't blood. It was the oath that held against the gathering dark. The sun hung low like a blood-orange lantern over Dust Haven, its rays slicing through the dust motes, swirling in the parking lot, turning the air into a hazy veil of gold. Hawk's boots planted firm on the cracked asphalt, the heat radiating up through the soles like a warning pulse from the earth itself. The two suits from the van stood 10 paces away, their postures rigid under ill-fitting jackets that strained at the shoulders, the faint scent of cheap cologne cutting through the dry desert breeze. Behind Hawk, the Iron Vow crew idled their engines low, a subtle rumble that vibrated the ground like the growl of a waking beast. No one drew weapons. This was a line drawn in resolve, not blood. The lead suit, a wiry man with a hawkish nose and eyes like polished stones, stepped forward, his voice slick as oil. "Last chance, Riley. The woman's debts are ironclad, signed in Vegas, witnessed by the right people. Hand her over and we walk." Hawk's gaze didn't waver, the wind tugging at the edges of his vest, carrying the distant tang of sage from the mesas beyond. Years of riding these forgotten routes had taught him the rot beneath the surface, officials on payrolls, debts twisted into nooses for the desperate. Sophia's story echoed the ones he'd heard from too many. Widows and orphans caught in webs spun by syndicates masquerading as lenders. "Those right people," Hawk replied, his tone even, laced with the gravel of old battlefields. "The ones who faked her death to keep her quiet. We've got photos, plates, ties back to crooked badges. Walk, or this ends with truths you can't bury." The second suit shifted, hand twitching toward his pocket, but Jax's presence at Hawk's flank, a mountain of leather and quiet menace, held him in check. The Brotherhood's strength lay in unity, not aggression. They'd gather evidence, rally allies, expose the corruption that preyed on the vulnerable. Inside the hospital, through the slatted blinds of Sophia's room, the standoff unfolded like a tense reel of film. She pressed Lucas close, the boy's heartbeat thumping against her side, his small frame tense as a coiled spring. The room's air was thick with the hum of the air conditioner, mingling with the faint, comforting scent of the wildflowers Ella had placed on the side table. Simple blooms from the desert edge, a touch of life amid the sterile white. "He's standing for us," Sophia whispered, her voice steadying as she stroked Lucas's hair. The boy looked up, eyes wide with a mix of fear and fierce pride. "Like a hero in those stories you tell? The ones about promises that don't break?" She nodded, memories flooding back in fragments, Hawk's vow under a canopy of stars, his hand on hers as they dreamed of a life beyond the chaos of his deployments. That promise had survived, presumed graves and shadowed years, now blooming into this fragile family. The sheriff, Harlan, emerged from the lobby doors, his face flushed under the brim of his hat, clipboard clutched like a shield. He'd made his call, no doubt, to strings pulled in higher offices, but the Iron Vow's reach extended further. Old comrades in distant precincts, feeding intel through secure channels. "Stand down, all of you," Harlan barked, his voice cracking like dry timber. "This is official business. The boy and woman are under protective custody until we sort the Vegas claims." But his eyes betrayed him, flicking to the suits with the unease of a man caught in the middle. Hawk stepped aside just enough to let Harlan see the crew's formation, bikes angled like barriers, riders' faces set in unyielding calm. "Protective?" Hawk echoed, the word heavy with irony. "From the ghosts you helped create? We know about the clinic that lost her records, the report that buried her alive. Oaths like that don't hold in the light." Tension rippled through the group, the air electric with unspoken threats. The lead suit sneered, pulling a folded paper from his jacket, a document stamped with official seals, outlining Sophia's debts in fine print that hid the extortion. "Sign it over, or the kid joins the collateral." Lucas, peering from the window, gasped, but Sophia hushed him, her mind racing to the past. After the real crash, the one that scarred her body and mind, she'd surfaced in a haze, taken in by a network that promised safety for silence. They'd twisted her desperation into leverage, using Lucas as the ultimate chain. But Hawk's return, ignited by a child's innocent question, shattered that hold. Ethan, she murmured to the glass, as if he could hear, bring us home. Jax moved first, not with force but precision, snapping a photo of the document with a concealed device, the click inaudible over the idling engines. That's evidence, he said flatly, his voice carrying the weight of their shared history. The suits exchanged glances, the realization dawning. This wasn't a lone rider they faced, but a web of loyalty spanning states, bound by codes that outlasted paper trails. Harlan cleared his throat, sweat beading on his brow. Look, Riley, maybe we talk this out. No custody yet. The concession hung like a crack in the facade, the first fracture in the corruption's armor. Hawk nodded once, signaling the crew to ease back, but his eyes promised more. A ride into the heart of the lies, where justice would be served not with fists, but with the unyielding truth of a promise kept. As the suits retreated to their van, tires crunching gravel in hasty retreat, Hawk turned toward the hospital doors. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across the lot. The desert wind whispering of roads yet traveled. Inside, he found Sophia and Lucas waiting, the boy's arms wrapping around his legs in a hug that sealed the bond. You did it, Lucas said, voice muffled against Hawk's jeans. Hawk ruffled his hair, the simple gesture grounding him amid the storm. We did it. Together. Sophia met his eyes, the tattoo on his arm now a bridge across the lost years. The fight's not over, she said softly. They'll come harder. Hawk pulled them close, the scent of hospital linen mixing with the faint leather of his vest. Then we ride harder, for the family we chose. Outside, the crew revved to life, engines harmonizing in a symphony of resolve. Jax clapped Hawk's shoulder. Word spreading. Our contacts in Reno are digging into the clinic. This web unravels from the edges. Hawk mounted his bike, Lucas climbing into the sidecar with a grin that chased away the shadows. Sophia, discharged under their watch, joined on a spare ride with Ella, the nurse proving a steadfast ally in the unfolding saga. As they formed up, the horizon beckoned, a ribbon of asphalt vanishing into twilight, promising trials of conscience and redemption. Hawk gunned the throttle, the vibrations syncing with his pulse, the boy's question from the night before echoing as a clarion call. In a world of broken oaths, theirs would endure, forging justice from the embers of loss, 1 mile at a time. The convoy rolled out under the emerging stars, lights piercing the gathering dusk like beacons of hope. Deeper secrets waited, alliances tested, truths unearthed. But in that unity, Hawk found his anchor. Family wasn't given. It was ridden, protected, redeemed. If this story's gripping your soul, hit that like button below. It fuels these tales of honor and heart. The twilight deepened into a velvet shroud over the endless ribbon of Route 66. The convoy's headlights carving golden paths through the encroaching night. Hawk led the formation, his Harley's roar, a steady anchor amid the symphony of engines trailing behind like echoes of thunder. The wind whipped across the open plain, carrying the crisp bite of cooling earth and the faint, acrid whisper of distant wildfires scarring the horizon. Lucas rode in the sidecar, his small frame bundled in a spare jacket from Jax, eyes gleaming with the thrill of motion, the desert stars beginning to prick the sky like scattered diamonds. Sophia clung to the back of Ella's bike, her arms wrapped tight around the nurse's waist, the vibration of the machine syncing with the tentative hope blooming in her chest. For the first time in years, the road felt like a promise not to escape. They'd pushed hard from Dusthaven, veering onto back routes to shake any tails. The Iron Vows scouts reporting the unmarked van had peeled off after the standoff, but shadows like those didn't vanish easily. Hawk's mind churned over the fragments Sophia had shared in hushed tones during the ride. The clinic where she'd awakened, amnesiac and alone, tended by figures who spoke in coded warnings. They called it protection, she'd said, her breath warm against his ear as they paused at a roadside diner for fuel. But it was a cage, debts piled on for services, threats if I spoke of the crash. They said you were lost in the flames overseas, Ethan. I believed it to survive. Her words ignited a slow burn in him, not rage, but a quiet fire of justice, the kind that forged oaths anew. Lucas, overhearing snippets, had squeezed Hawk's hand. "We'll fix it, right? Like in the stories. Good guys win with truth." The diner had been a brief respite, its neon sign flickering like a weary heartbeat against the gathering dark. Inside, the air hung heavy with the sizzle of grease and the murmur of truckers nursing coffee in cracked mugs. Jax had spread a map across a booth, his thick fingers tracing lines to a safe house in the hills outside Reno, a nondescript cabin owned by an old war buddy, fortified with more than locks, cameras, jammers, and a network of eyes from the Brotherhood. "Our Reno contacts got prelims," Jax reported, sliding a burner phone across the table. "Clinics tied to a front called Horizon Aid, shell for laundering, with Vegas muscle pulling strings. Faked reports, buried survivors. Sophia's death was their handiwork to tie up loose ends from a botched deal." Hawk nodded, the pieces slotting into place like gears in a well-oiled machine. Corruption wasn't new to the Iron Vow. They'd ridden against it before, exposing officials who turned blind eyes to exploitation rings, upholding a moral code where loyalty trumped law's twisted branches. As they mounted up again, the convoy snaked into the night, the mesas rising like silent guardians on either side. Hawk glanced in his mirror, catching Sophia's profile, her hair streaming like a banner of resilience, the tattoo on his arm, once a monument to grief, now thrummed with purpose, a reminder that promises endured beyond graves and deceptions. Lucas chattered softly over the engine's hum, pointing out constellations he'd learned from Sophia's bedtime tales. "That's the Hawk, see? Like you." The boy's voice cut through the wind, simple and pure, mending fractures Hawk hadn't known were there. Fatherhood, delayed by fate's cruel hand, settled on him like a well-worn vest, protective, unyielding. Hours blurred into the rhythm of the ride, the air growing cooler as they climbed toward the foothills. Jax pulled alongside at a scenic overlook, signaling a halt. The crew dismounted in a loose circle, engines ticking as they cooled, the vast silence of the night enveloping them like a blanket. Stars wheeled overhead, indifferent witnesses to the unfolding drama. Sophia joined Hawk by a weathered guardrail, Lucas scampering to explore the edge under Ella's watchful eye. "I never stopped loving you," she confessed, her hand finding his in the dim glow of a flashlight. "Even in the fog, your name was the anchor, when Lucas asked about the tattoo that night. It was like fate riding in on your bike." Hawk pulled her close, the leather of his vest creaking softly, the scent of her, faint lavender from the hospital soap, mingling with the pine-scented breeze. "We lost time, but not the vow. Iron Vow stands for this, for families rebuilt from ashes." Jax approached, his face etched with the lines of a man who'd seen too many battles lost to deceit. "Burners buzzing. Reno says the suits from Dusthaven radioed ahead. They're mobilizing. Horizon Aid's got pull with local sheriffs, but we've got leverage. A whistleblower inside, an ex-employee ready to talk if we get her safe." The news hung heavy, a thread pulling them deeper into the web. Hawk's resolve hardened. This wasn't just about debts or faked deaths. It was about dismantling a system that preyed on the broken, turning survival into servitude. The Iron Vow had oaths etched deeper than ink. Protect the innocent, expose the rot, ride as one. "We go in quiet," Hawk decided, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Gather the proof, shield the witnesses. No shadows touch my family." Lucas returned, clutching a smooth stone from the overlook, his eyes bright with discovery. "For luck," he said, pressing it into Hawk's palm. The gesture, small yet profound, sealed the moment, a child's faith mirroring the Brotherhood's creed. They remounted, the convoy descending into the valley toward Reno's glow on the horizon, a constellation of lights, promising both refuge and reckoning. Sophia rode closer now, her bike paralleling Hawk's, their shadows merging on the asphalt like intertwined fates. Whispers of wind carried fragments of conversation from the crew, tales of past rides, victories snatched from corruption's jaws, the quiet honor of men who chose family over fortune. As the safe house came into view, a sturdy cabin nestled among twisted junipers, its windows shuttered against prying eyes, the first rain of the season began to fall, soft patters on leather and metal. They pulled in under the cover of pines, engines silencing to a hush. Inside, the air was warm with the scent of aged wood and fresh coffee brewing on a stove. The whistleblower waited, a woman named Grace, her face lined with the weariness of secrets kept too long. "They stage accidents for anyone who borrows and can't pay," she said, voice trembling as she handed over files. Doctored reports, ledgers of extortion, names linking Horizon Aid to Vegas enforcers with badges. Hawk scanned the pages by lamplight, Sophia at his side, Lucas dozing on a cot under Ella's care. The evidence painted a damning portrait, Sophia's death, a cover to silence her knowledge of their schemes, Lucas a pawn in the leverage. Grace's eyes met Hawk's, gratitude flickering amid the fear. "You riders! You're legends out here, keeping oaths when the world's forgotten how." He nodded, the weight of her words settling like the rain outside. This revelation would demand more than a ride. It called for alliances forged in the fire of truth, a moral stand against the tide of greed. As thunder rumbled in the distance, Hawk felt the pull of the climax ahead, the confrontation that would test every bond, redeem every loss. Sophia leaned against him, her presence a quiet strength. "We're in this together," she murmured. Lucas stirred, smiling in his sleep, the stone of luck clutched in his fist. The night deepened, rain drumming a steady rhythm on the roof, washing clean the road behind while illuminating the path forward. Hawk stepped onto the porch, the crew gathering in the shadows, their silhouettes united against the storm. Oaths renewed, family reclaimed, justice beckoned, not with fury, but with the unbreaking will of those who rode for honor. The desert's secrets were unraveling, one truth at a time, drawing them toward a dawn where redemption awaited. Rain lashed the cabin's tin roof in relentless sheets, turning the night into a symphony of percussion that drowned out the world's sharper edges. Hawk stood on the porch, the cool mist kissing his face, carrying the earthy petrichor of soaked junipers and the faint metallic tang of ozone from the storm's heart. The Iron Vow crew huddled in the shadows of the eaves, their leather vests glistening under the porch light, faces etched with the quiet determination of men who'd stared down worse than rain-swept reckonings. Jax leaned against a post, his broad frame a pillar of steadiness, while Ella kept watch inside, her nurse's instincts extending to the fragile peace they'd carved from the chaos. Sophia joined Hawk at the threshold, her hand slipping into his, warm and real against the chill. Lucas's soft snores drifting from the room like a child's unspoken vow of trust. Grace paced the worn floorboards behind them, her fingers twisting a frayed handkerchief. The lamplight casting flickering shadows that danced like ghosts of her confessions. The files she'd surrendered lay spread across the rough-hewn table, yellowed pages of forged signatures, ledgers inked with extortion's cold math, photographs of clinics masked as sanctuaries but built on lies. "It starts with the vulnerable," she said, her voice cutting through the downpour, steady now that the weight of silence had lifted. "War widows, crash survivors, they offer aid, then bind you with debts that grow like weeds. Sophia's accident. They twisted it, declared her gone to cover a witness who saw too much, a shipment of tainted meds funneled through Horizon Aid to line pockets in Vegas." Hawk's eyes scanned the evidence, each line a thread pulling tighter around the syndicate's throat. No blood on these pages, but the moral rot was clear. Lives commodified, oaths to protect the innocent betrayed by badges bought cheap. Sophia's breath caught, fragments of memory solidifying like rain into streams. I remember now, the night before the crash I overheard them. A deal gone sour, officials turning eyes for payoffs. They staged my death to bury it all, left me adrift with Lucas as leverage. She glanced toward the cot where the boy slept, his small chest rising and falling in innocent rhythm. Hawk pulled her closer, the scent of her hair, damp earth and faint lavender, grounding him amid the storm's fury. The tattoo on his arm, Sophia Forever, seemed to pulse under his sleeve, a living emblem of the promise that had outlasted presumed graves and shadowed years. "They preyed on our pain," he murmured, his voice low thunder. "But pain forges strength. The vow rides for this. Truth over tyranny, family over fear." Jax thumbed his radio, the static crackling like distant lightning. "Reno's allies are moving. We've got a federal contact, old squad mate. Clean as they come. Who's forwarding this to the right desks? No raids, no guns, just the weight of proof crashing down." The crew nodded, a ripple of resolve passing through them like the wind through pines. These weren't outlaws chasing glory. They were guardians of forgotten codes, veterans who traded battlefields for highways, binding their scars into a shield for the lost. Ella emerged from the doorway, a mug of steaming tea in hand for Grace, her presence a quiet thread in the tapestry of chosen kin, nurse, rider, mother, all woven into the night's fragile web. As the rain eased to a steady drizzle, headlights pierced the gloom from the winding drive, not threats but reinforcements. 2 sedans pulled up, gravel crunching under tires, disgorging a pair of agents in crisp suits, badges glinting honest under the porch light. The lead, a woman named Rivera with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense stride, extended a hand to Hawk. "Captain Riley, your network's rep precedes you. We've reviewed the files en route. Horizon Aid's House of Cards is folding. Arrests are rolling in Vegas as we speak. Your whistleblower here's key, safe passage for her and the family." Grace exhaled, shoulders slumping in relief, while Sophia's grip on Hawk tightened, tears mingling with the mist on her cheeks. Lucas stirred inside, rubbing sleep from his eyes and padding to the door, drawn by the voices. "Dad?" he called softly, the word a bridge across the lost years. Sealing the bond with innocent certainty. Hawk knelt, drawing the boy into an embrace, the rain's patter a gentle backdrop to the moment's profundity. "It's over, son. The shadows can't touch us now." Rivera outlined the plan: protective custody, transition to full immunity, records expunged, a new start far from the desert's grasp. No dramatic showdowns, no fists in the dark. Justice unfolded in quiet deliberations, the power of unyielding truth, dismantling empires built on deceit. The agents gathered the files, Grace slipping into the first car with promises of witness protection, her parting nod to Hawk, laden with gratitude. "You kept your oath when mine was broken. That's the real ride." The convoy reformed under clearing skies, stars emerging like hesitant allies in the velvet black. Hawk mounted his Harley, Lucas secure in the sidecar, Sophia behind him on the spare bike, her arms a steady anchor around his waist. The iron vow flanked them, engines humming a farewell to the storm. Jax at point, Ella riding tail, the Brotherhood's lights a constellation of loyalty stretching into the night. The road unspooled ahead, asphalt slick with rain, but firm under tires, the air fresh with the promise of dawn. Whispers of wind carried echoes of the night's revelations. Debts dissolved, lies unraveled, a family reborn from the ashes of presumption. As they crested the final rise, the valley below glowed with the first blush of morning, painting the horizon in hues of rose and gold. Hawk felt the weight lift, not in triumph's roar, but in the silent honor of oaths fulfilled, his to Sophia, the vows to justice, Lucas's budding trust in a world made whole. Redemption wasn't a destination, it was the ride itself, mile by mile, binding scars into strength. Sophia leaned forward, her voice soft over the engine's purr. "We made it, Ethan. Together." He nodded, throttle steady. The desert's vastness, no longer empty, but alive with possibility. The sun broke free, gilding the convoy in light, as they vanished into the awakening day. A legacy of quiet courage, where promises endured and family chose its path. Thanks for riding this journey with us. These tales of honor, heart, and unbreakable bonds wouldn't echo without you. If stories like Hawks move you, hit subscribe and join the convoy for more from the open road.